Today we celebrate the 18th Sunday of Ordinary Time. I remember back in my country, always around the month of July to August, we would have an annual retreat. This annual retreat would draw all the priests from the Archdiocese of Nairobi, which is the capital city, and all the priests would come together with the bishop and would have a one-week retreat. And how pleasant it was. We would have the breaking of bread together in the morning and the special hour which they called the Holy Hour. And the spiritual hour was a moment when we would eat together, have a meal together, and we'd exchange stories of how our ministry has been. And there would be laughter, and we'd forget everything about our parishes and just enjoy the moment with our bishop. And there it was. And then they said there was the spirit of the retreat. And the spirit of the retreat was having all types of wine before you. Choice was yours to drink whatever you wanted. And there we would drink and exchange pleasantries with the bishop. And it was a moment, oh, how I loved the bishop, how I loved those moments, how I wish and looked forward to the next retreat. Food is a very necessary human ingredient. It brings friends together. It brings familiar faces together. It even brings enemies together so that they can be able to resolve their differences. And so it is with food, a very important thing. It is a good thing. We all love food. We all want to eat something to sustain ourselves. In the first reading of today is a reading which brings us, the Israelites are in Babylon. They are captives there. And there, their voice comes out of a prophet, Isaiah, that assures them that come and drink, come and eat freely. No money, without money, drink all that you can, drink and eat. But this is a prophecy and a voice coming at a time which was disturbing. Not so many people wanted to move out of Babylon. Although the prophet says that the Babylonian Empire will come to an end. But the people say that some of us will not leave Babylon. But for the few who dared to leave Babylon and go, as the prophet's voice called them out, were disappointed. Because when they went back to where they were, to their lands, they didn't see a good meal, they didn't see wine, they didn't see the choicest foods, and they were disappointed. But this was a prophecy of something that would happen later on in their lives, something that will happen to a different generation, and they had to wait for over 500 years. For Jesus, the Son of Man, to be born of Mary, to be born of a virgin, to come into the world and become one like us in all way but without sin, a man who was rejected for every word that he said. And this man and this prophecy comes to life in the gospel of today, the Gospel of Matthew, a narrative that is found all across the other gospels, the feeding of the 5,000. That what I said in the time of Isaiah has come to pass today. Now John the Baptist, who came as a voice in the wilderness to speak about the coming of the Messiah of Jesus, has just been killed, has been beheaded. And Jesus is in mourning. Jesus has a loss of his first cousin, a dear friend of his. And he retreats to a lonely place, said, let us go to a lonely place and think and mourn our friend John the Baptist. And there, when they think they're away from everybody else in an isolated place in a desert, the crowd still follow Jesus. We still want more of you. We still want you to teach us. We still want you to feed us with the Word of God. And after feeding them and telling them about the Word of God, and they had been spiritually nourished and taken care of spiritually, they still need something else to feed their bellies, to have something in their stomachs. They were hungry. And this, the gospel text of Matthew, is different from Mark and the others, because in Mark they were wondering, where can we get food? But here they know exactly what they have. Their meager resources, the crowd's hunger for food. And they say, Jesus, send them away to the nearest villages that they can eat something. And said, no, I will not send them away. You yourselves give them something to eat. But Jesus, we have meager resources. What is 2 fish and 5 loaves for this crowd? An immense crowd. How can we feed such a great crowd with these meager resources? It is only enough for us. They forget who is with them. They forget that it is the second person of the Trinity, God himself. Sometimes we often forget who is with us, and that is what makes the difference. When Jesus is with us, what appears to be impossible becomes possible. And there he says, let them sit on the grass. And he takes the 5 loaves and 2 fish. He looks up to heaven to his Father. He blesses it and breaks it and gives them and says, take this. Familiar words to us in the Eucharist, words that I myself will say very soon in this Mass. On the night he was betrayed, he took bread in his hands and gave it to his disciples and said, take this, all of you, and eat of it. And in the same chalice he says, take this, all of you. This is the blood of the new and everlasting covenant, which will be poured out for you and for all men, so that sins may be forgiven. Do this in memory of me. The words that he's used today, he breaks it, and a miracle happens. The miracle that only Jesus can perform, to feed them. Only men are counted, 5,000, not even women, not even children. We are talking about maybe 15,000, probably 20,000 did Jesus feed. Little in our hands is much in the hands of God. There is nothing that Jesus touched that was not transformed completely. When Jesus touches the blind, they are able to see. When Jesus touches the lame, they are able to walk. There is nothing that Jesus touched me. He also touched me. And I've not been the same person if I dare to touch him back. Every time I receive him into my heart. So the disciples here, the meager resources that they had, they dared to put it in the hands of Jesus. And the miracle here is more that they say that it is more of sharing. They were challenged by Jesus to the extent that the meager resources that each and everyone had, they shared it out, and that was the miracle, that it was enough. And 12 wicker baskets remained, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. That the disciples who claimed to have nothing in their hands, not enough in their hands, now had a basket full each. Go out to the other people, to the pagan territories. Go out and never say that you do not have enough, because I'm with you. Every time we celebrate Mass, every time we have the Eucharistic celebration, it is always enough. Every time we share from our hearts what the meager resources we have, it is enough. I remember in St. Catherine's, in this pandemic and still going on, families would be drawn from everywhere, coming with foodstuffs, McDonald's. They would come with noodles. Some would come with different food varieties, and they would share this with the less fortunate. They would share this with those who do not have, and it has always been enough. And I can remember a moment in St. Catherine when they said, Father, there's ice cream here, it will get spoiled. You must eat this. There's this food you must eat. So it was an abundant supply of food that we were scared that it was going to get spoiled. Look at a miracle before us of how God takes the little that we have and makes it abundantly available to the people. He only needs you to have trust and faith in him that he can do the impossible, a miracle of God. What do you have that you think is meager before you? What is it that you have in your life that you think is so small that cannot be shared? What is it that you have that you think, no, this is not enough? Have you tried God? Have you tried Jesus to see whether it will be enough? I ask you today to try him and see how he will transform it and make it into something great, into something worthwhile, something meaningful, something that is so much good and abundant, not only to you, but to your friends and your relatives and to yourself. The second reading, which is given to us today, Paul tells us, as he clearly tells us to the Romans and also to us, nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. Nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. God loved us so much that he was willing to give us the small thing that he had, the best thing that he ever had, as little as it seemed, his only Son. He gave us the best. Look at the unconditional love of God. said, these people are sinful. They're living in darkness. What can I give them? I'll give them my son. And his son came and showed us the unconditional love of God by dying for us on the cross, by giving all his life to us. He says, how much do you love me? He said, this much is how I love you. This is how I love you. And he stretched out his arms and died for us. If God can give us so much in our lives, what about us? What little do we have that we can give God back? If it is not the little that we have, Saint Mother Teresa said, give the little you have with so much love. She began with a single morsel of bread. She could only feed one person at the moment when she began. And today the missionaries of charity, the congregation she proudly began, is feeding thousands and thousands of people around the world. If a single woman of Calcutta, Mother Teresa, can do so much, what about us when we remove from the generosity of our hearts and give it out with so much love? It is not what we have, it is what we can give. It is not who we are, but it's what we can become when Jesus interferes with our lives. The disciples were saw what they can do when Jesus is with them. Ask yourself, what can I do when Jesus is with me? That is the whole idea of today. May God today nourish us with food from heaven. May he nourish us so much with the Eucharist that after we have received the Eucharist, maybe the priest says, go in peace, the Mass is ended. May we carry that same Jesus and give it to our brothers and sisters who are not maybe able to join us today, that they too may share and come into full knowledge of who Jesus is. May we carry that Jesus always with us, because it's the food that sustains us to that place, the final journey when we'll reach before the face of God and see him, and he says, come to me, you good and faithful servant, and inherit the kingdom I prepared for you since the beginning of time. May God bless you today as we look at the Eucharist, as we look at the one who sustains us and put our trust in him, that he too may help us to sustain others and help others. May God be with you today, tomorrow, and always.